So today's going to be a little different. We're not going to go into an argument for Christianity or address objections against it. Today we're merely going to discuss tactics on how to engage a conversation with somebody who has an opposing view. Much of what we'll be discussing is from a book called Tactics by Greg Koukl. It's considered by many apologists as a must-read. But like I said, today it's not required for you to read it. We're going to go over several of the basic concepts. These steps will not only work for Christian apologetics, it's also helpful with politics, work-related decisions, or anything you would have a conversation with somebody with an opposing viewpoint. So, let's see people are still waiting.
Are we waiting for people?
No, I thought, I just see you writing. I didn't want to go further.
Oh.
I was just writing information.
Okay. So what's the purpose of this conversation? That's what we'll discuss first. What are we wanting to get out of it? Why are we doing it? The purpose is not to have a debate, or at least it's not a formal debate. A formal debate is two opposing views presenting their arguments for why they believe they are right, and they go back and forth, and trying to dismantle the other view, all the while defending their own viewpoint. I know I'm representing a ministry whose president's reputation is one of the greatest Christian apologists of all time, and his reputation was formed by public debates. However, Dr. Craig admits that the purpose of his debates are not to convert the person he is debating. He does public debates for the benefit of the audience. The debates allow the audience to see that the Christian faith is a reasonable belief. So whenever we are discussing, when we are having a conversation with somebody, that's not what we are going to do. You are having a conversation. As with any ministry, the foundation is in love, and apologetics is no different. Here's a quote from Ravi Zacharias. If truth is not undergirded by love, it makes the possessor of that truth obnoxious, and the truth repulsive.
Is this something that's going to be on something you're going to send us?
Yeah,
Okay.
like always, I'll
Okay.
send out everything.
Okay, so I won't worry about writing.
Yeah, I mean, unless you really want to, I'll wait for you if you want to.
I can wait and print it out.
So, the purpose of confronting someone's worldview is not. The purpose of confronting someone's worldview is not to win a debate and send someone off as a defeated foe, but ideally you are having a conversation that will develop your relationship with that someone and help that person develop a worldview that is both logical and coherent. You are both discussing a topic in an attempt to find the truth. You will both present your views on the truth of the topic, and you'll challenge each other's viewpoints and try to develop a truthful conclusion. Or, if you're talking with somebody who is very steadfast in their beliefs, Your goal is to leave a stone in their shoe. You know that feeling when you're walking along and there's a stone in your shoe. It's not overburdened enough to where you won't necessarily want to stop what you're doing, but it's still there and it's bothersome. That's kind of the goal in that case. It's just annoying enough for you to think about it as you continue to your destination, to say something that will be bothersome enough to get them to continue to think about the conversation you had, to get them to question their own views and consider the arguments that you've made. We need to get people to talk and to think about their worldviews instead of just believing what they have been told to believe or regurgitating what they have been told to say. So we'll set some ground rules. All right, assertions. The first thing to understand with having an intellectual conversation with somebody is the understanding that the person who is making the assertion is the one who has the burden of proof. What this means is you just can't make an assertion and expect me to believe it just because you said it. You need proof to show that what you are saying is true. This rule applies to both the offensive and defensive sides to a conversation. For example, I believe that women have the right to have an abortion, or I believe the unborn child has the right to life. In both of these examples, the person is making an assertion. Therefore, has the intellectual responsibility of providing proof for their statement. The other person doesn't have to believe it just because you're saying it. It's your responsibility to provide the evidence or the proof or the logical conclusion of why this makes sense. Now, if you made an assertion, or if you were attempting to provide proof for an assertion, and your response is, that's absolute nonsense, that's an assertion. So, therefore requires an intellectual responsibility to provide proof. So if somebody has that response to what you're saying, that's absolute nonsense, or that makes no sense, or what you're saying is dumb, that's an assertion. Therefore requires that person to have responsibility to provide why they're saying what they're saying. Now, I'm not so naive to believe that the person you are talking to will always understand their intellectual responsibility in a conversation. However, there are tactics that we can use to guide the conversation, and we'll talk more about this a little later. No insulting. Your attitude should be, I would like to have an intellectual conversation about this topic, and I'm willing to have this conversation with you as long as it remains civil. Emotional shouting matches will get you nowhere. If a person is overwhelmed with emotion and regurgitating whatever it is that they feel, they're not listening nor care to listen to anything you have to say. If the conversation is at this point, there are tactics to try to get it back to a conversation. But once again, we'll talk about this a little later. Do not insult a person's character or his assertions. There are multiple ways to do this, including a passive, patronizing attitude. This format is not intended for you to be the teacher and them to be the student. Okay, you're not there to discipline them or to teach them or to show them the way necessarily intellectually. This is developing a relationship with somebody. You must be interested in what this person actually thinks and feels about these topics. Your attitude upon hearing a person's assertion cannot be something like, oh, bless your heart. Here, let me show you how to think rationally about this. Something like that. That's not the attitude to have. Because then you're just telling that person what to think or how to think. Ideally, we do not want to tell them their view is wrong. We are helping them to come to that conclusion themselves.
That's how I teach.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's how I teach. I ask my students questions until they figure out what is wrong with their answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Very same. Very similar.
Yeah, I'm taking you everywhere I go.
Well, I don't know if I can do it this, but chemistry and physics was great.
This is so emotional, is the deal. We gotta calm our emotions.
Yeah. No preaching. The format is not intended for you to preach at somebody. This conversation is not Lacey. You are living a life of sin, and you may think you're having fun now, but one day you're going to wake up and look around at the mess of your life and realize it means nothing. Lacey, it's time for you to put this sin behind you and accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Now, I'm not saying for you to never preach at somebody. In fact, the Holy Spirit may lead you to preach at somebody at some case, at some instance. But that's not having a conversation with somebody, and that's not the format we're talking about when we're talking about this. All right, so getting started. For some of you, this is probably going to be the hardest part, getting the conversation started. This is typically the hardest part for me. Here are some things that I've learned. Do not wait for the perfect moment. If you're waiting for the perfect moment, the conversation will never begin. You could be thinking ideally it would be great to have this conversation with this person one-on-one, with no distractions, and we have enough time to fully express our viewpoints. Yes, that would be a great scenario, but that's not life. Life is busy, hectic, chaotic. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just try to find a moment to have a conversation. Supplement instead of, did you see the game last night, or crazy weather, or did you see this on Facebook, with a conversation that goes a little deeper, and you're just getting it started. You begin the conversation, and if it ends early and the other person is still interested in what you have to say or interested in having this conversation, maybe try to schedule it later, and then you can, when you schedule it later, you can have it more ideal circumstances after that. One way to start a conversation is to just listen. Listen to the Holy Spirit. Listen to what the Spirit is telling you and where He's leading you. For it is the Spirit that will be the one who changes the hearts of those you talk to. It is the Spirit who leads people to God. Also, listen to the conversations around you. You may hear an assertion that you may not agree with about this particular topic, or the Spirit will tell you that what they're saying is a lie, or there's something wrong about it. Now remember, they are the one who made the assertion in this case. So they bear the responsibility of having to defend it. So at this point, to begin the conversation, it's easy as saying, "Excuse me, I overheard your statement and I find the topic you're discussing piques my interest, or I'm interested in it. Do you mind if I ask you some questions concerning your viewpoint?" Or something like that. If they accept, they become in the defensive position. And you are the one in charge of the conversation. You are, like, think of an interview that you've seen on television. The person giving the interview has all the power. They can ask whatever question they want, and the person being interviewed not only has to answer the question, but must be able to defend their statements. And do not abuse this power, okay? Your intention is not to make this person look or feel like a fool. Remember, the purpose of this is is also not to make us feel smart, but we're doing this out of love. We're trying to develop a conversation with somebody. We're doing this out of the love of God. We want them to bring them to the Lord, bring them to love. So, another way to start a conversation is to ask worldview questions. Is there a God? Where do we all come from? Is there more to life than what we can see? Or just plain, what is your worldview? How did you logically come to that conclusion? Things like that. Or we can ask personal questions. Ask them about their dreams or hopes or aspirations. Why are these things so important to them? What do they live for? What do they live their life for? Or what do they want their life to be about? Or what do they want to leave behind after they go? What gives these things value in the first place? What makes them truly happy? And why? Do they have any regrets in life? Are they afraid to die? Why? Things like that. Now, not everybody's going to be comfortable with these questions, but these are questions that everybody is interested in. These are questions that are in the back of people's mind. They may not be comfortable in talking about it, but it's important for people to think about these things and to talk about these things. So once you get the conversation started, then that's where the tactics begin. The first and main tactic is called the Columbo tactic. So, if you don't know who Columbo is, Columbo was a television show that aired mostly in the 70s. Columbo was an unassuming detective who did not look like much, but he was able to use that to his advantage. Columbo was able to continue to ask question after question until the person he was interviewing, he eventually tripped up and said something to incriminate himself. Just one more.
There's as he's walking out the door.
Just one more. All right,
And
and
the element of surprise.
yeah,
Surprise people think it's so small.
It's on all the time in one of those local channels like MeTV or something like that, one of those
yeah.
food channels.
Yeah, I watched a lot of it growing up. And that's what we're going to do for the most part. We're going to be gathering information, and we're helping the person formulate the worldview at the same time. They tell us what they believe, and if it's a general statement, we ask them to expand on their idea by asking, what do you mean by that? And when we're satisfied with their actual assertion, when we get down to what it is they're actually saying, we can then ask, well, how did you come to that conclusion? This question is a nicer way of asking, what evidence do you have to support your claim? So it's just nice to say, well, how did you come to that? As a person is explaining their viewpoints, attempting to make their worldview coherent, and attempting to support their claim with evidence, we're going to be listening for flaws in their beliefs, or simply put things that just don't make sense, or highlight things that don't make sense. So here are Aristotle's laws of thought, also known as the 3 fundamental laws of logic. The first one is the law of non-contradiction. Now we've talked about this one before. It means that if two things are mutually exclusive, they cannot both be true. For example, God can't both exist and not exist at the same time. Or a square circle cannot exist. This law applies to statements that are also self-defeating. Statements like truth does not exist. If somebody says truth does not exist, you can respond simply by saying, is that statement true? Or we cannot know truth. How do you know that that statement is true? Do you know that statement is true? Things like that. The second one is the law of excluded middle. This law is stating that either a proposition is true or it's not true. There is no middle ground. And the third one, the principle of identity. This is basically saying that we mean what we say. For example, when I say nothing, I mean nothing. I don't mean things that are equal to nothing, or things which was used to be thought as nothing but are now something, but we still call it nothing. But when I say nothing, I mean nothing. So that's what it basically means. Principle of identity. It's like defining your terms whenever you're talking a debate. It's like I mean what I say. I'm not there's no back meaning or something like that. Here is a picture of a bunch of different logical fallacies. Now I know you can't see it, but it will be in the stuff that I give you. And we're not going to go over all these. But it's useful to be able to recognize these as we listen to a person with the opposing view, as we make our own assertions. But we're going to look at a few of them, a few popular ones. The ad hominem fallacy. What this is the person we are talking with is attacking our character or the character of our faith in an attempt to undermine our argument instead of actually addressing our argument. You see this a lot on media. When someone disagrees with a person, that person throws insults at them instead of addressing what it is they actually have to say.
And those insults have nothing to do with what had just been said?
Correct. Yeah. You're insulting them, you're saying you're a bad person, or you're a racist, or whatever it is, instead of actually addressing what it is that person has to say. Next one is special pleading, or what we've called in the past the taxi cab fallacy. This is trying to make something the exception of the rule. Saying something like, I believe everything that has a beginning has a cause, except the universe. That's the one thing that doesn't. You're pleading for a special case, or the taxi cab is you're paying the fee up until a point, and then you get out of the cab before the destination arrives at its destination. The bandwagon fallacy. Appealing to popularity, or the fact that many people do something as an attempted form of validation. So everybody else believes it, it must be true.
Kind of starts in grade school, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to be hurt.
Exactly. And people still do it today. I mean, you hear it on the news all the time. All these people believe this, therefore it must be true.
Huh.
Are you giving this to me, or?
Yes, it's on my computer.
Okay. The next one is appeal to authority fallacy. Using the opinion or position of an authority figure or institution of authority in place of an actual argument. Okay? So basically, somebody else said this, so it must be true. Well, sometimes really smart people say really dumb things. So you're not giving an actual argument. You're just quoting somebody said something. Well, that's not an argument. The next one is the anecdotal fallacy, using personal experience or an isolated example instead of a valid argument, especially to dismiss statistics. Politicians use this all the time. They point to a specific isolated story to try to get you on their side or to get you on their viewpoint. Appealing to emotion. Trying to manipulate an emotional response in place of a valid argument or a compelling argument. This, of course, is very popular today, as it is thought that the stronger you feel emotionally about something, the more it validates your point. It's extremely popular today. So, here are some memes that I found. I don't know if you can read that. Something like, it's wrong to teach that morality is objective. For everyone, all the time. It gives that confused stare at the bottom. Or, morality is subjective. The God of the Bible is immoral. They can't just pick one, they have to pick both. Something like that. Here is an article you might find useful. It is called The Ultimate List of Apologetic Terms for Beginners with Explanations. It's written at capturingchristianity.com. I wish this article was available when I was getting started. This article will also help you in terms if you plan on continuing your apologetic journey. Sometimes you watch debates, philosophical debates, and they use a whole lot of terms or discuss some things that you're just like, I don't know what it is they're talking about. This article explains several of the terms that you would hear in debates. Yes. The next tactic is called taking the roof off. In this tactic, we adopt the other person's viewpoint. We then press their view to the logical and absurd consequence. Like I said, ideally, we want the person we're talking with to realize what they are saying doesn't make sense on their own by just asking questions and having them develop their own thoughts and realizing themselves that what they're saying doesn't make sense. So we want that ideally to happen in the Columbo tactic by asking, well, how did you come to that conclusion? That doesn't make much sense. How do you explain that? And we're hoping that they come to that conclusion themselves. However, sometimes they may need some additional help. They may not be seeing the problem. So we say something like, just to clarify, when you're saying this is what you're saying. For example, when you are saying that we cannot know truth, what you are saying is that you don't know anything. Is that what you're saying? That you don't know anything? Something like that. And if you don't know anything and you can't know anything, why are we even having this conversation? The next one is called the steamroller tactic. This tactic discusses what to do when the other person becomes emotional, belligerent, or overwhelming with their attitude. You basically give them 3 chances. The first chance, you graciously stop them and negotiate terms on how you would like to continue this conversation. Something like, I have given you a chance to speak without interruption. I would appreciate the same courtesy. Or I'm more than willing to have a conversation with you, but I'm not going to stand here for you to yell at me. Something like that. Basically, you want to negotiate the terms of how you want the conversation to continue. But if the terms are broken, you will not continue with the conversation. The second chance is that you shame them. Basically, you're reminding them of the negotiated terms that he agreed with and that you both agreed with, and you would appreciate it if he kept his word. And the third, if it happens again, you leave the conversation. Remember, as I said before, if a person is overwhelmed with emotion and regurgitating whatever it is that they feel, they are not listening to you, nor do they care to listen to what you have to say. So you're not going to really find a good example of the steps that we've discussed so far in an official debate. In an official debate, there are 2 opposing sides. One side is making the official assertion, while the other side is arguing against that assertion. And there is a moderator who oversees the debate to make sure things are fair and civil and all that. One popular example of the steps we discussed is by a guy named Steven Crowder.
Is he the guy in that film you first showed us in the beginning? Who's in a group of college students
Maybe.
in an auditorium and that one young man?
No. That was Frank Turek. And he was an apologist. Steven Crowder is not an apologist. He runs a political website, political media. He's on conservative radio, TV. He is a self-proclaimed Christian, but his show isn't like targeted towards Christian topics necessarily. It's more of a political thing. Now he does a segment called Change My Mind. Basically, he sets up a table outside of a crowded area, like in this one, it's at a college campus. And basically, in front of the sign gives an assertion followed by the words, change my mind. And he invites people to sit next to him, and they have a one-on-one conversation. And what Crowder immediately does at the beginning of the conversation is to make the person that he's talking to making an assertion. And at that point, Crowder becomes the interviewer, and the person ends up defending their viewpoint in order to try to change his mind. The topics include like, I'm pro-life, America is a superior nation, socialism is evil, and so on. So it's more of a political thing. Now, although it's a political thing, like I said, these tactics are not just, they won't just work for just Christian topics or Christian conversations, or for you to talk to somebody about their life viewpoints or something like that. This is for like, this can work for political stuff. So,
Is he on the radio or?
no, he has I suppose if you want to see his stuff, if you're a subscriber to conservative radio TV, then you would see it. Otherwise, his stuff's on YouTube. Just search Steven Crowder on YouTube and it'll come up. Or his show's called Louder with Crowder. That's what it's called. So here's a video. It's about 13 minutes long, but he's talking with another student that's here on campus, and this one's about abortion. He's like, I'm pro-life, trying to change my mind. And that's what's going on.
Do you want to hold the microphone? Sure. Okay. Can you just hold it like below your mouth back here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That became a point of contention earlier, and I don't want to, for you to not be heard. So I am pro-life, and I am willing to hear the other side's argument and have my mind changed.
Basically, I'm pro-choice more because of personal liberty, you know?
Okay.
I think that if, in an instance where, I don't know, a woman is raped, and
Sure.
she gets pregnant, I think that she should have the right to abort the baby if she
Why?
doesn't want to have it.
Why?
So
Because,
here's
I think
asking why
Number one, it's her body.
Mm-hmm.
It's her life, and you know, without her, there wouldn't be a baby in the first place. So I think that's why, you know.
What if it's not her body? What if she's aborting another body?
Well, then that would be murder.
It would.
You know, it really comes down to at
trying
what
to guide the
point
conversation
is it another
to
body.
a certain-
Yes, well, you also used the word life. You said it's her body, it's her life. So obviously the big disagreement, I'm pro-life, I couldn't care less what a woman does with her body, right? They can get the god-awful eyebrow tattoo that leaves them a scar for 50 years after that. It's their prerogative. But when it's another body inside of your body, when it's another life, that's a violation, of course, of the non-aggression principle. So that is the only question that really needs to be answered, right? If we're going to find common ground.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I mean, I
So you can just keep it on you because I've got a mic on me. So you know, I appreciate it though. You're playing reporter for me.
kind of.
Pablo, Channel 5 News.
You know, I think that there's a certain point where
Okay.
it is somebody else's body or not. I mean,
Okay.
it really all comes down to at what point a woman is gonna abort. You know, if she's gonna abort, 8 months, pregnant, then I think that right there would be wrong.
Why?
I agree with you because I think that that's closer to being an actual human being, another person.
Okay.
When it's 3 weeks and it's a cell or little membrane or whatever, I mean, I don't know about biology, but I mean, when it's not an actual body,
Okay.
when it doesn't have legs, it doesn't have actual fingers, I think that at that point she can decide.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah.
It's okay. Like I said, you can keep the microphone. We'll hear me. You said maybe 8 months, maybe not 3 weeks, right? You said I don't know a whole lot about biology.
Yeah.
But you agree that if it is a life, you don't have the right to take that life.
Yeah.
Okay. So we agree that you don't have the right to take another life. And you've conceded that you're not a biologist, so you don't know the exact sort of prenatal developmental stages, right?
I don't, but there are people who do.
Okay. So I'm just saying for our conversation here, I'm not either, okay? So let me ask you this. We're going to kind of go through the philosophical idea first, and then we can get to the medical. Let's say you're tonight driving home from school, and you see someone in the road, and you're about to hit them, but you have enough time to stop. Would you stop?
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Because I don't want to kill somebody.
Okay, exactly. Okay, no, that's a good answer. If not, we'd have to have you written up. Let's take that same scenario. You're driving home tonight, and you see someone walk out in front of the car. You're not entirely positive, but you're pretty sure that could be a person, and you do have the ability to stop. Do you stop?
Is this a trick question?
No, it's not.
So it's not a person.
No, you're pretty sure it's a person, but it's a little fast and blurry. You have enough time to stop. You're not sure that it's a person, but you think it's a person. Do you stop?
Yeah, I would stop for anything.
Okay. Why?
Because I don't want to hurt my car.
Oh, for real? Because of your car?
I'm gonna be honest with you.
Oh, that's fair.
I see a branch and I try to evade it.
So They can just use you and a Kia at Planned Parenthood and job done. So you would stop, right? You're saying because why? Obviously not your car. You wouldn't want to hurt,
or
kill a human being.
Kill whatever it is,
Okay, even if it's a dog or something. Okay. So even in the second instance, where you weren't sure, you erred on the side of life.
Yeah.
You erred on the side of not killing. So in this case, where you've conceded, you don't know where life begins. You don't know if it's a life or not. Shouldn't we err on the side of life and not terminating life?
Yeah, we should. And on that side, I do agree with you. But I believe that, again, I think it's more about personal liberty. And, when it comes down to a woman's body, I think that a woman should have the right.
Well, hold on. What if we're talking about another body, right? We both agree a woman can do anything. This is the issue. A woman can do anything she wants with her own body.
Yes.
If a woman wants to amputate herself, and a doctor says, I'll do it, and this actually occurs now, these people identify as amputees. This is a common practice. I'm fine with it, right? So we need to frame in the argument fairly and accurately. No one who's pro-life is telling a woman what to do with their body in any other instance outside of when it directly ends the life of another
come
person.
up with his own viewpoint instead of just regurgitating.
The burden of proof is on you. Why is it not a life?
It's just personal liberty. What do you mean?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's not a life, but I also, would say it's an actual human being. Like that. I mean, I'm not really for, actually killing a baby at the stage where, it's an actual baby. But when, like I said, if it's a cell or whatever, I mean,
So when is it okay?
I would say 3 weeks, probably 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. At the point where
3 months.
it actually has like little toes, that's when probably.
So before we get to that, because that's medical, what makes a human? What makes a human being? What is a human being?
A brain.
A brain is a human being.
Yeah, like once it has basically a formed brain, at that point I believe it's wrong to kill a baby. But
so
before that,
what defines a formed brain?
I couldn't tell you that.
We just threw out brain very definitively. So what determines a brain? You mean a functioning brain, cerebral capabilities?
Yeah, or I mean just the actual membrane, the actual pink stuff. Once they start forming that or have it, that at that point I believe.
Well, that's forming immediately because the tissue forms into a multitude of ways, right? So then you would have to say as soon as conception, zygote at that point because it could be potentially brain tissue.
Yeah.
So you can't. That doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. So you're saying brain. So it would have to be a developed brain at that point. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between tissues. So a developed brain. This would assume cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, this isn't my argument, but it's very common. It goes back hundreds of years. But Ben Shapiro's used it. What if I'm in a coma? I'm brain dead. What if my brain doesn't function? Does that make me less of a person? Is it less of a life? Can you kill me?
Not necessarily. I mean, I wouldn't, kill you, but,
Seems like you might want to with your car, as long as someone waxes it afterward.
Well, okay, that's good. But honestly, at that point, that certain situation would not be okay because, at one point it was life, and there is still hope that he can wake up one day from the coma.
So now we're dealing with the potential of life.
Yeah.
You see how that short, you know where this goes, right? Yeah. So you said brain, and you said, well, not really brain or functioning brain, because even if it's a non-functioning brain, it matters there's the potential of it being a functioning brain. So now we're back to square one. That would, of course, apply to the baby growing in the womb. It's a life by your definition.
Yeah.
Why do you have the right to kill?
Well,
not you, a woman.
Yeah, I would say a woman has a right because, it basically comes down to it being her body,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You just said that it was another body.
But
another life.
It's inside your body. If somebody were inside my body that I do not want inside, I think I should have the right to get them out.
So every time you're having sex with a woman or man, they have the right to kill you because you're inside their body?
Wait, what? Wait, oh, okay. Yeah, well, they actually would have the right.
They would have the right to kill you?
or to get me out. I mean, if she doesn't want me inside her body, I think she should have the right to get me out, right?
Right.
You should have the right
To get you out. If the woman, I'm not saying you're, well, let's get beyond, you're not raping the person.
Okay.
Okay? All right, Pablo, I don't think you're a rapist. I think you're a little bit shifty with the microphone, but far from a rapist. If you're having sex with someone, you are in their body, male or female, you don't need to tell me, I don't care. That's not the point of this conversation. Do they have the right, do they have the right to kill you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
No, if they don't have the they don't have the right if it's consensual, but if it's
Kind of like
Okay, so let's use that, well, that's the only one that's relevant,
like,
right?
You're saying this
Because this is a baby.
We're taking
This
it
baby
to
did
its
not
absurd
consent to
conclusion.
being harmed.
but the woman did not consent to being raped either.
Okay, let's use this. Let's remove rape from the table. Let's deal with more than 99% of abortions, right? Okay, so let's say rape, incest, let's take it off the table, all right? So then you would say that the vast majority of abortions, based on your standard of what is a life,
Yeah.
people who abort when they are not raped, when it is not non-consensual, that is morally wrong.
Yeah, and there I completely agree with you. But
Okay.
I would have to say I'm more pro-choice just because of that certain.
Well, I'll say you're more pro-choice because of 1%? Less than 1%? But you're pro-life, so you don't think a woman should be able to abort if it was a consensual sexual engagement that resulted in a pregnancy. You don't think abortion is a
There in that instance, I do not think it's okay because I think there are
Okay.
a lot of people that abuse the fact that they can abort. And
that's the vast majority of abortions.
yeah, and that I'm actually against that. But
Okay.
just because of that certain situation of the people being raped for that reason, I would have to subside to.
So because of a very, very small percentage of people, rather than allow other choices, because you say you're pro-choice, I'm pro-choice too, you know.
Yeah.
I'm pro-4 choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Abstinence, adoption, pregnancy, contraception. I'm just not pro-killing, right? There's a fifth
Gotcha.
choice.
Yeah.
So you're saying I'm pro-killing if there's rape involved. And if you want to remove the extreme examples and say that you're pro-life and all other examples, that's fine. That's not the policy of the platform right now that's pro-abortion. And I respect that you would disagree with many of the people here who consider themselves pro-choice. But that's an extreme example.
Yeah.
So, in that case, I would say no one's forcing a woman to carry a baby. In that case, I'm simply precluding someone from killing a baby. But again, we're dealing with less than 1% of abortions. So we agree on 99-point-something% of abortions that it's morally incorrect to end a life.
But
Okay.
that 1%, I mean, because 1% of a billion is still 100 million. So.
I know, but the 99% is hundreds of millions of babies that have been
I mean,
aborted.
10 million, I mean, but
Yeah, but what about the hundreds of millions of babies you've admitted their lives that have just been ended?
and I agree with you. I say that I'm saying that's morally wrong.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Pablo. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I appreciate taking them. Thank you, man.
Great conversation.
Thank you very much, Pablo. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well,
It's nice that he ended it.
well, like I said, he tries to be as courteous as possible. There are times where it gets to like the steamrolling tactic, where like the person that goes after this one, she is not as pleasant. So it's kind of like at some point he cuts off the conversation, basically like we're not getting anywhere. This has got to be the end of the conversation. But you're trying to have a conversation with somebody. You're trying to develop your relationship with somebody. You love this person. You're not wanting them to look like a fool or like that. You're genuinely wanting them to develop their viewpoint. Like you see how like he was basically saying stuff that he's been told to say, like I believe in the liberty of the woman and the woman has the choice. And so he's like trying to develop what it is that you mean by that. What exactly do you mean? And so he's trying to further develop that viewpoint. And then once you get there, you can be like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Or why do you believe that? So eventually, So eventually, the person that you're having a conversation with, if it goes well, and you're actually having this back and forth conversation, they're going to ask you, well, they're going to ask you, what do you think? Or what's your viewpoint? Or what's your worldview? Either the person will become frustrated knowing that what he's saying doesn't make sense, and he's just trying to shift the attention off of him, or he will want you to present some evidence for your disagreement or why you believe what you believe. So I'm going to show another video. The first example is Dr. William Lane Craig is having a debate with Dr. Peter Atkins. In this video, Dr. Peter Atkins challenges Dr. William Lane Craig's assertion that science cannot prove everything. The second part of the video is another Christian philosopher by the name of J.P. Moreland, both of whom have been rated as there's a list of 50 most impressionable philosophers in the world. Both of them are on that list.
What was that second name?
J.P. Moreland, Moreland, who was confronted by the same issue. Both of them deal with it differently. So, let's see what it's kind of dark. I didn't know what to do about that, but it's an older video. This is an older video.
Consider the statement, quote, "We should only believe what can be scientifically proven," end quote. Can that statement be scientifically proven? Well, obviously not. And thus the scientific naturalist's position refutes itself, and so it cannot be true.
But do you deny that science cannot account for everything?
Yes, I do deny that science.
So what can't it account for?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept. Let me list 5. Logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Metaphysical truths, like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with an appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Aesthetic judgments, number 4, cannot be accessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method. Science is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, in the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points A and B. But that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory.
So would that be a private disclosure?
So none of these beliefs can be scientifically proven, and yet they are accepted by all of us, and we're rational in doing so.
Years ago, I was speaking at an evangelistic event in Baltimore, Maryland, and I was told that there was a very vicious atheist who got his PhD from Johns Hopkins University and been an engineer for 30 years, really hated Christianity, and a person was going to bring his boss to this little evangelistic gathering where I was going to be sharing my faith. Well, I was at the hors d'oeuvre table before the event got going, and I saw this gentleman walk in the door with his boss, and sure enough, they made a beeline to the hors d'oeuvre table, and this friend of mine introduced me to this gentleman, and no sooner did we exchange pleasantries when he said, "Well, I understand that you're a philosopher and a theologian," and I said, "Well, I give it my best shot." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I used to be interested in that myself when I was a teenager." but I've outgrown it now because I realize now that if you can't test it and quantify your data and measure it in the laboratory, it's nothing but a bunch of idle speculation and hot air. You ever heard anybody express that attitude? A lot of people have that attitude. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Well, I let him go for about another 2 minutes. And then I interrupted him and said, excuse me, but I have a question. I'm a little bit puzzled. If I understand you correctly, if you can't quantify something in the lab and test it scientifically, then the assertion is nothing but idle speculation, a bunch of hot air. And he said, that's absolutely right. He said, I've believed this for a long time. And I said, well, you've said 30 or 40 sentences that have come out of your mouth in the last 2 minutes. And of the 30 or 40 things you said, I can't think of a single thing that can be tested scientifically. I said, if I'm wrong, would you show me which statement you've made that is scientifically testable? But if I'm right, you see my dilemma? What you've been saying for the last 2 minutes is nothing but a bunch of Well, he changed the subject very quickly. But the point is that when people tell you that science is the only way we can know things, or it's the only thing that's true, that statement can't be true and it can't be known to be true. And so statements like this are false. Science, ladies and gentlemen, is a wonderful gift from God, and I'll say that before I close again. But it is only one way of knowing reality. It's important, but there are many ways to know reality outside of science. And the statement that science is the only way we can know reality is not itself something that can be known by science. And it is a self-refuting claim.
So they handled it a little differently. Dr. Craig had he's overly prepared. So he had basically this statement ahead of time. He had this list of things that he was going to say, and he just went through the list of all these different things that can be proved by science and gave little brief explanations for it. And I love the look on Dr. Atkins' face. It's like a deer in headlights. It's like, oh no.
And who was the presenter? Anything familiar?
I can't remember. Like he was a political leader during the conservative period of like.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Anyway, and then J.P. Moreland, he used more of the tactics we're talking about. Basically, lets the person go on. You give them rope until eventually they have enough rope to hang themselves with, and then they're like, well, this is what you're saying, but I'm a little confused because you say this and then you say that doesn't equal. So, but let's see where I'm at.
Well, and in those situations, the very first one, this was a planned situation. They said, we want you to talk about this and this and this, and he was allowed to have all this planned.
Yeah.
The second gentleman was caught by surprise,
Right.
and wanted to know what this guy, thought over and over and over again, and the guy just loaded his plate with ammunition right back at him. And
Yeah.
that was great.
Yeah. And then basically what I'm trying to say is eventually you're going to be confronted. And how you deal with that is up to you. Sometimes it can be handy though to be able to, like I've said before, to be able to express your worldview, to express your viewpoints, and be able to give reasons why you believe what you believe. Because eventually, if you have this conversation long enough, it will get there. So it would be good for you to have that. That's basically what I'm saying. However, there will be times when you don't know the answer. So we're going to discuss what to do when you're stumped. Here are some tips on what to do when that comes up. Number one, do not make stuff up off the top of your head. If you don't know, say you don't know. Imagine if you're someone were to approach you and say, I am completely lost. This is where I'm trying to go. Can you help me? And you have no idea how to get to where they're wanting to go. I mean, you wouldn't make something off the top of your head by just leading them down the direction. It would be something like this if that was the conclusion. In the same way, it would be bad for you to just make up directions off the top of your head. Don't make stuff up when it comes to the topic of discussion. If you lead that person down the wrong path and they figure out you're lying, you'll basically ruin your relationship with that person. They can no longer trust you. So instead, it would be better for you to build your trust with that person. Build your trust with that person by just basically saying, that's a really good question, but you don't know the answer right now. Be truthful about it. Number two, don't ignore the question. All right? Instead of just admitting that you don't know the answer and move on, you can say you're going to write it down and say that I would love to be able to research the answer to your question because you would also like to know the answer to that question, and then request to meet up again to discuss it later. When you ignore the question, you're ignoring the person and their heart. Remember, the point of this is to build the relationship with that person. And the last tip, when searching for an answer to that question, don't be discouraged. You can go to a person who trusts you, who you may believe, you can go to a person that you trust, that you believe may be knowledgeable in the topic, or there are plenty of free resources out there. Here's 3 examples: reasonablefaith.org, crossexamined.org, capturingchristianity.com. But these are just 3. There's tons of free information out there. And I would like to encourage you to continue to become knowledgeable. You will eventually find that the objections to your Christian worldview becomes repetitive, and there really aren't that many good objections to the Christian worldview. I watched several, like lots of videos of apologists followed by Q&As, and basically the questions that the audience answers most of the time are questions that these guys receive literally every single trip that they go to, and it's repetitive. And in the same way that, maybe at first it could be a little rough, but eventually the more you learn, the easier it will be, and the more you'll get used to the skills. With all that being said, this is the end, and all you have to do left is practice. I would like we can discuss the worldviews a little bit before we leave. Thank you for participating in the class, and if you have any questions or anything like that, you can always feel free to contact me. I'd love to be able to discuss those questions with you. Okay? Have anything else before I basically just